Good day, folks. This is Bob from BBD News with Views. The topic of discussion today, to start with, is our neighborhood. Essentially, looking east, but there was an article in the Observer. Looking east traditionally meant, obviously, looking and acting east meant actually going as far as Southeast Asia, I think. But this is look east and stops at Bangladesh. Everybody knows Bangladesh is a critical component of India's national security matrix, right? It has a huge value in terms of maintaining stability and peace in the northeast, in West Bengal, and hence critical when we approach China, our biggest challenger, right? In order for that, you really have to keep your relationship with Bangladesh humming and on even keel. And a couple of things that one has to remember that, historically we are tied, right? Because obviously it was one country in 1947 and was East Pakistan after that. And subsequently, India had a critical role to play in the birth of Bangladesh in 1971. So what you can't disassociate is India's and Bangladesh's historical connect. You also can't kind of disconnect the Congress and the Indira Gandhi from this, because it was India's, let's face it, best military victory. A victory that actually despite all odds. And also, however, it created a lot of domestic havoc in India, because subsequent to that, because of all the refugees that moved into Assam and West Bengal, both these states essentially became hotbeds of divisive possible politics, right? And at this stage, let me just say this, despite all the effort that we are making there, we have to admit that Sheikh Hasina is our best ally in that state. If the opposition under Khalida Zia, it's not going to work in India's favor, let's face it. Hence, you really can't put her in a spot, due to our domestic politics. And I say, whatever we are doing or whatever we attempt to do, whatever we want to do in terms of, one, obviously execution of projects have to be fast forwarded and efficient to compete with China. More importantly, you cannot let domestic politics, I don't want to say domestic politics as much as BJP's politics, rupture that region. Because two events that are coming up, that is the elections, state elections in Assam and West Bengal, have a potential, because of the kind of campaigns being run currently on divisive politics based on communal harmony, which will destroy communal harmony, but it will, in my opinion, create irreparable damage with our foreign relationship with Bangladesh for sure, which will not only allow Pakistan to step in, which they already have now re-established relationships, and I think besides anything else, under the pressure of China on Bangladesh, and hence allow China in. Right? So we have to be really careful. So when we look at this, things like this really point to the storm that's coming up in the northeast, right? Here you have an article, soon Assam bill to turn government-run madrasas into general schools. Well, the community that's being targeted. It might be a good thing, but it's not going to be one-sided. Then you have this, Didi 8 Adhikari exits TMC, sparks a spate of resignations. You see the kind of divide that's going to happen, and the kind of language and divide and rule that's going to happen in West Bengal. Obviously, there was this article which was Modi Hasina to hold bilateral talks on December 17th, which happened. PM Hasina to launch Mujib Bapu digital exhibit pre-1965 rail link. But this was the one that was a real worry, written by Indrani Bagchi. It says, rise of Islamist extremism in Bangladesh worries India. Modi is set to hold virtual summit with Hasina today. And that's true. This is real worrisome, right? And this is going to get a lot of fuel for the fire if our divisive politics are the kind of stuff that we've seen in Uttar Pradesh, right? But what does Hasina have to say? Bangladesh pillar of neighborhood, first policy. Modi after Hasina meet. 7 pacts inked. All this will be of no use, like I said, if domestic politics takes the route that we think it's possibly going to take. And things like this. Hasina calls India true friend. Modi says Dhaka key pillar of neighborhood policy. If that's the case, I think we have to ensure that whatever we do domestically is not at the cost of these relationships. I can understand you want to win every election, but in case you're a nationalist party, you've got to be aware of this. You've got to be controlled. But another interesting piece of news. Modi writes to Sharif, condoling his mother's death. Interesting move, right? Again, it's the same thing with Indrani Bakshi writing the same thing. PM Bangladesh, major pillar of our neighborhood first policy. True friend, Dhaka says. And here's it, Brazil, Loska, so it's everywhere, right? India, Bangladesh signed 7 packs, revive railway line, important stuff. But what the CDS has to say is this. Nepal must learn from Lanka, be vigilant about China, CDS. That's an important statement that the CDS has made. But that's also not only true for Nepal, it is also true for Bangladesh. It is also true for Myanmar. So rather than just stay it with Nepal, he should basically expand it to the entire neighborhood that we have, right? Because the eye on the dragon is just not only on Nepal, it's on Bangladesh, it's on Myanmar. Bangladesh is a critical component of their strategy, folks. And we have to be really careful, right? More after the break. Welcome back, folks. Let's do my favorite topic, which is China. This is a really interesting article by Shishir Gupta, which says early Chinese intel warning came 6 years ago, and by none other than our current NSA Ajit Doval, who wrote a seminal paper in 2030. And what did the paper do? Paper highlighted the Chinese intelligence agency, Ministry of State Security's penetration into Dalai Lama's establishment in Dharamsala, support for anti-India insurgent groups in the northeast with the help of Pakistan's ISI, and close watch it kept on Indian army activities. Okay, and then what else it do? The MSS has involved itself as a premier foreign intelligence agency. Besides diplomatic intelligence, it has been aggressively hunting for technological data and system information to augment national economic and military capability. So if they have reached this kind of standing, I wonder what our internal agencies like the RAW are doing, right? I don't think we have any intelligence in China, actually, I think. It continues to bank heavily on Chinese global diaspora that provides it a vast catchment area for human assets for intelligence gathering and espionage. To widen its catchment area, it is expanding its illegal cover for intelligence gathering from using commercial companies and business houses, media agencies. Here, media agencies, folks, I can tell you, Hindustan Times could have been one of them. Chinese banks, etc. Establishment of nearly, that was the other one, Confucius Institutes in 180 countries. That was another place where they were really messing around with. Chinese intelligence, everyone was still, but besides all knowing all this, we were still taken by surprise in Galwan and Pagangso, man. It's amazing, right? Communist Party of China infiltrated Western consulates and I believe the Indian consulate in Shanghai, and mega corporations masquerading as professionals. The Indian agency's presentation gave a broad overview of Chinese intelligence infiltration attempt into the government and the key pillars of democracy. This includes our unions, folks. That's why what's happening with Honda, Toyota, and everybody else, right? The use of Chinese mobile applications for extricating data, the embedding of malware in power equipment, and the role of Confucius Institutes. It's amazing, right? And influencers. Now, it's amazing. We're still buying a lot of power equipment from China despite knowing that. We still continue to debate on Huawei, finally, which may have been shut. Right? What to say? With India standing up the PLA aggression in eastern Ladakh and demanding that the status quo ante of April be restored, the Narendra Modi government needs to be battle prepared for a dominant China. Okay? So this is coming from there. Finally, I think, citing national security, government get set to bar Chinese telecom gear. Import of, it's amazing too. This is just really good. And here, what do we have? 7 branches of China's ruling party have India link. A CPC member worked in Indian consulate in Shanghai. But this is not new. This is global news. Chinese spy lured aspiring politicians into honey trap. And I'm sure that they've got many of Indians into honey trap too. Then finally, naming China. India stood up to Chinese aggression at LAC, says Rajnath. And Razul Laskar writes, India stood up to China, provoked aggression on the line of actual control, fought the people PLA, and forced its troop to retreat. That's interesting. Finally, naming China. Now, what do you have here? But still, hopeful disengagement and LAC after more talks, India says. Yes, folks, your guess is as good as mine. I don't know. We just keep doing this talk, going nowhere. India calls for further talks over LAC. Why is India calling for talks? I just wonder. But what do we have Jay Shankar saying? India has to participate more in global change. Well, that's nothing new, but I'm glad we are standing up to the dragon when we say India, Vietnam look to boost energy ties amid China glare. Meet next week to focus on defense security. The other critical part is what Ruchir Sharma writes, right? This is important for India's geostrategic event. World's most important place. How tiny Taiwan came to be the epicenter of the global battle for tech supremacy. What does he write? The new Cold War between the United States and China is increasingly focused on access to one industry in one race. Computer chips made in Taiwan. That's it, folks. I've always been saying computer chips made in Taiwan, invite people to set up computer chips manufacturing foundries in India. Over the past year, Taiwan has taken a lead race to build thinner, faster chips or semiconductors. It is now the main source for these critical building blocks of digital industries like artificial intelligence and high-speed computing, and the coming Internet of Things, in which homes, cars, and even clothes will connect to smartphones and voice-activated speakers over 5G network. That tells you how important chips are and how important Taiwan is. And guess who else is ready to help us without naming the challenger? Ready to help India defend itself, says Israel. Israel won't be found wanting in meeting India's requirement to defend itself against all challenges and hostilities. This is without naming the country, but everybody knows the two countries for India is China and Pakistan. More after the break, folks. Folks, Global Views by Walter Russell Mead gives advice to what Biden's team should do to handle China and Russia. Amongst them, Beijing doesn't. He calls it clearly that Beijing is not willing to reset its ties. It shows with China and Australia. Well, okay. While you can play bad cop and good cop with them, it really it says won't derail. While continuing to do so, won't derail the new team. Failing to deal effectively with the challenge of a rising China poses to America and its Indo-Pacific allies could. Right? Okay. Trump administration, see what the Trump administration understood is very critical. And he says is that it doesn't really matter what Americans think about climate change, human rights, or the politics of gender. If the US had lost World War II, Franklin Roosevelt's idea about human rights and multilateral institutions would be historical curiosities. Okay. The hard reality is politics come first, and international order is only as strong and effective as the geopolitical foundation. Okay. That's what's important. But the US with its allies must get the power politics right or watch its hopes for more peaceful and sustainable world order fade away. The global governance issues that many of Team Biden care most about cannot be addressed without the hard-nosed geopolitics and protecting its allies in the Indo-Pacific, and that's very critical. What's China doing? China flashes some star quality in push to eclipse Washington. They are on their way to eclipse Washington, right? We cannot submit to humiliation and have to carry out a tit-for-tat struggle. And what about India? India can't also take the humiliation from China, must carry on its tit-for-tat retaliation. What do they call these wolf warriors? China says. Our wolf warrior envoys are just cubs, insists China. China digs in despite new US sanctions. Pro-democracy group says effort to crush opposition in Hong Kong are rising. But China understands that the dollar is the critical part of its geopolitical prominence. So what does it say? China wants to be the world's bank, understanding that. But the US needs to counter that and says NASDAQ to remove 4 Chinese companies' shares from indices. This will go a long way. The second thing, what is important? Risky Chinese firms pay up to issue debt. Now, things are not hunky-dory in China. It says investors are cooling off on debt from riskier Chinese companies after missed payments by state-backed firms having cast doubt on the reliability of government support. And more importantly, Xi has to rethink his project of the century. That is the road, the BRI. Apparently, it is falling off the cliff. Why? Because the amount invested in it in 2016, $75 billion were lent out. Now, last year, only $4 billion were lent out. Such a serious drop in development finance is equivalent to an earthquake in global development finance. Jai Hind.